we're going to troubleshoot is intercom paging. So assuming that we've set our drivers up and that everything is communicating correctly, the most common problem with intercom is that we haven't properly defined the music input going into the Control4 system that will receive the intercom output of an AudioShare wall station. So what I mean by that is, if I go to the Connections tab, and in my particular setup, I'm actually having intercom run into an HC300 in the band room. You need to make sure that the audio input is actually connected to the appropriate port of the AudioShare wall station. Again, this is very similar to how we set audio endpoints, where we set the output 1 of the AudioShare system, or the IO port 1 of AudioShare system, by defining the endpoint for that room. Now, you don't have to have an endpoint for every single room, but you need to make sure that the endpoint for the room that is connecting the AudioShare system to the Control4 system is defined somehow. And again, by doing that, you can either use the audio endpoint 1 or the audio endpoint 2 to assign that endpoint to whatever IO port you want on the AudioShare system. By doing that, it now tells the driver and the AudioShare driver which port it needs to communicate with the Control4 system on. So if we go back to the controller, we know that our audio in should be going on port 1 of the AudioShare system. That's where we're going to get our intercom audio from the AudioShare system, is from the wall station in that room. It just so happens that I've also made sure that the audio out is also connected to that same port, so that I can receive music from the Control4 system back into the AudioShare system. Anyway, so that's the first thing that you need to look at, is make sure that you've set that correctly, that the IO port is consistent and matches the physical connection that you have for audio in or audio out. Now that you've validated that, the next thing that you need to do is make sure that you have the AudioShare, let's go back to system design, make sure that you have the AudioShare set to automatic intercom. Now by default it should be set to auto. You want to make sure that that is set to auto. Now you can override this by turning it off, but then you will have to manually, in the programming page, you'll have to manually set the functionality of turning specific rooms on and connecting them to the appropriate input port as a source. The next thing is make sure that you've got all of the Control4 intercom zones defined, and they need to be comma delimited. So if I've got 3 rooms in here and they're at the zone room ID 5, room ID 35, and room ID 79, make sure they're comma delimited like so. Again, you can look up what these room IDs are by going to the Actions tab of the AudioShare Hub driver and click on List Room IDs. And if you go to the Lewis screen, you can see every single one of the rooms in your project and what their room ID is. And so just make sure the appropriate room ID for the room that you want the intercom page to go to, that's a Control4 zone, make sure that appropriate room ID is entered in to that intercom zones tab. Just kind of as a refresher, the digital audio delay is only necessary if you are running the Control4 or the intercom audio into a Control4 controller. If you're using an audio or an amplifier, a distribution amplifier, or an audio switch, then you can probably set that digital audio delay to 0. The reason for that delay is because the Control4 controllers, because they try to send music over Ethernet to their wall station navigators and such, they add an inherent 3 to 4 second delay for buffering, network buffering of the music. And so this audio delay affects our intercom pages as well. So you need to make sure that that is set to at least 3 or 4 seconds, so that when you press the N key on an AudioShare wall station, this driver will make sure that it will wait this amount of time in seconds before it'll actually shut the Control4 zone off, so that the intercom page will complete before you end. So that's what that is. That's the purpose of that particular property. Now, the last field here is the dummy room. In instances where you're listening to digital media that's coming from Control4, because on an intercom page we actually interrupt a room if it happens to be listening to digital media, because it actually disconnects the digital media from that room. The way Control4 behaves is if its digital media player has been disconnected from any room's audio endpoint, it will actually stop the player. And we don't want that, because as soon as the intercom page is done, we want the music to come back to those rooms. So we have this dummy room property here, which will allow us to temporarily, behind the scenes, reroute the digital media to that room and keep it playing there, or we can pause it there if we want. And then when the intercom page is done, we can then reroute the digital media back to the rooms we want it to go to and disconnect it from the dummy room. Now, the dummy room in my project here literally is a room which is hidden. So it's physically a room, and if you go into the navigator tab of that room, you'll notice that I've hidden it so that it doesn't show up in the location menu. That way, the end user won't see the room at all. But you'll notice I just have a dummy amplifier in here. It's actually just a driver. It's not connected to anything legitimate. And if you go to the connections tab of that dummy room and you click on the dummy room itself and you select its audio endpoint, you notice that I've set the audio endpoint for that dummy amplifier to the actual room selection of the dummy amplifier. So I've kind of faked it out and make it think that there's an audio endpoint of this amplifier that it needs to route its music to, when in reality there isn't anything there. So all it is just basically temporarily holding my music session for digital media until my intercom page is done, and then it will basically relinquish it, and I can reroute my music back to the appropriate rooms that it was listening to on, and then they can listen to their music. So anyway, that's just kind of how we handle the routing of music when intercom pages come in. The last thing that we'll show for troubleshooting is this debug mode. You'll notice that I have it in off. You can set this to print, and anytime activity is happening on the AudioShare system, it will list on the Lewis screen what was happening. So for example, if I do an intercom page from an AudioShare wall station, you'll notice that all of this information now populates in the driver Lewis screen, and I can use that to troubleshoot the system to make sure that everything is doing what it should be doing. This is also useful to be able to copy and paste and email to AudioShare support, so that we can help troubleshoot any problems that you're having. It's important, though, that if you're not troubleshooting, turn this off, because it causes performance issues with Control4. It will slow everything down. So just only turn it on if you actually want to troubleshoot a problem. Otherwise, make sure you leave it off. So anyway, that's just a basic overview of how to troubleshoot the AudioShare system. If you have any other questions, feel free to call AudioShare support, and have a great day.